to our ACC Legal Operations Tool and Technology conversation. If this is not where you intended to be, it's okay, stick around. It's a great place to be. Thank you so much, KJ, for getting this set up and started. Our topic du jour, and again, I apologize, my puppies are in rare form. They're excited for the snow. Our topic du jour is tools for managing outside counsel and or flex attorneys. So the hope today is to have a great dialogue, share some information, lessons learned on this topic. And as we work through it, I think to get started, I don't know, KJ, do we have any housekeeping items we need to go through before we dive into the first poll?
No, you just dive right in. Oh, you can dive right in. Sorry.
No worries. I appreciate it. So we want to open it up with a poll to get a sense of where everyone is with managing your spend with outside counsels or with other firms, flex attorneys, or other outside sourced providers, and whatever that looks like for you. So KJ, if you don't mind putting the poll forward, please. So where are you today? What is your organization doing? Are you currently supplementing your in-house law team? Is that a yes, no, or you're not really sure what you're doing? Give you a moment to answer and we'll see what that results come in as. Wow, so a good majority, so 76% are currently leveraging outside firms or flex attorneys. Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other poll questions?
We do.
Let's go ahead and we'll just kick it off and see where we stand. And then when was the last time you took the time to review your outside counsel, flex attorney usage and associated spend? So did you put it in place and never looked back? So you've never done it? Or are you on an approximate every 2-year cadence or even longer? Or pretty recently in the last 1 to 2 years, you took a look of where you're spending and are reassessing that usage and spend. All right, so it looks like for those of you, your 76% are using outside firms and 63% of you are staying current on revisiting. Awesome. That helps drive our conversation. Thank you for running those polls, KJ.
We have one more if you like.
I would love it. Thank you. And thanks everyone for participating. And do you monitor your use of outside counsel and or flex spending? So how are you monitoring it? Are you using an e-billing solution? Are you managing it through spreadsheets? Do you have an advanced relationship with a third party on your bidding processes? Or is there some other mechanism you're using to manage? Thank you, KJ. Awesome. So e-billing tools are the majority with a lot of spreadsheet use as well. And then a few of you are using third parties. I'm going to be interested in exploring what those that marked other are going to be. So very exciting. So we will get to that. I'm certain of it. So let's start the conversation. Thank you again for participating in the polls. So for those of you that are using either outside counsel, flex attorneys, or something else, I'm curious if you're at a position where you're comfortable sharing with this group of where, when you spend outside of your in-house, are you spending most of that money and time? Are you focused more on traditional outside counsel and for their subject matter expertise? Are you tapping into flex attorneys, or do you have kind of a third party outside service provider model where you actually have an extension of your team? that's outside of your company or something else. Does anybody want to open up and share? And friendly reminder, everything that's shared here is kept here. Although we didn't all sign NDAs, we're keeping it confidential. So just in respect for sharing across the community. I'll kick it off within our organization here at Arrow. We have an in-house counsel, but we tap into outside firms for subject matter expertise in specific areas of law that we either don't have through our global landscape and need it for a niche area of interest with a local law requirement, or within something so unique and specific for something that's bubbled up that we want to make sure that we have the right expertise on it. But we also supplement that with bringing in flex attorneys. They're a lower cost solution and they help step in when there are peak periods or if we're in flux and transitioning to hire in attorneys, or if we need a sanity check on a particular law and want some input, but we don't need to spend the dollars that you would need to spend with outside counsel. So we do both a dual model, and it fluctuates depending on the need and circumstances. Does anyone have a different model that you'd like to share?
I can share a little bit, Danica, if you like.
That would be great. Thank you, Jenny.
I was trying to remember when, but I think it was back in 2018, we created a preferred provider network. So we ran a whole initiative, and I think our charter was to be able to spend like 90-something% within the network, stay within the network. And what we've done is we've done just that, but we also, through regional and some local matters that come up, we've had to engage with niche firms, which we do. So kind of managing it with that combination. And it's been a really incredible experience. We've managed to stay within that 90-something%, keeping our work within the network and trying not to add too many firms as we go. But I think still a work in progress, and we still check it routinely. We use Legal Tracker and monitor usage and so forth, but been a really, really incredible experience for us.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's very helpful. Does anyone else have any questions for Jenny or anything that you wish to share? Now, we saw in the polling results that a number of us are leveraging e-billing tools, not just for the traditional processing of payments, but it looks like you're also using it to manage and monitor your usage and your spending. I'm curious if anyone has a particular e-billing solution. Jenny mentioned Legal Tracker. Success stories or situations where the tool didn't work out exactly the way you had hoped and are seeking
No.
other
Slowly
avenues.
down.
So interested in kind of a tools focused conversation. We ourselves are in the midst of a transition from one billing solution to another. And we're really excited for what this next solution may bring in terms of its flexibilities, capabilities, and visibility. And it's a lower cost solution for our organization. So, with that transition, it's too early on for me to share, any details of how it's successful, but can certainly share, some of the selection criteria and process, and some of the lessons learned on the implementation approach. But before I get into those pieces of it, would love to hear from all of you. Is everyone using Legal Tracker? Have people branched out? Are you using something different? Is it working? Is it not working? Um, who's interested in sharing today?
Hey, Danica, it's Brian over at Discover.
I'll share just a couple things. We are a legal tracker shop, so we're using legal tracker for all of our outside counsel spend. But when we have to bring in flex attorneys or just temporary kind of fill the gap kind of assistance, we're actually we're working with our professional services area to secure those resources, and they use a system called Coupa. And so that's where we're doing all of our tracking. It's kind of like a procure to pay platform. And so we just have the expense budgeted in our cost center, and then it goes against the activity in Coupa.
Great, thanks so much for sharing. And it looks like Kevin's raised a question. Does anyone have familiarity with Aperio?
I was going to add to the chat. I don't know Aperio. Here at Palo Alto Networks, we use Simple Legal. We use Simple Legal. I've had a lot more experience with Legal Tracker at previous jobs. Some good and some bad. I think there's pros and cons with every solution. But I'm starting to come across some limitations on reporting that was not.
And I'm sorry, can everyone please go on mute so we can focus on Latrice? Thank you.
The reporting is not as advanced as Legal Tracker, which I think has, we're having to find some workarounds around the fact that, you can't report on every single field. And I think they're in their beta testing on some advanced reporting. But yeah, we use Legal Tracker, Simple Legal. But I wasn't here during the implementation, but definitely something in a couple of years we'll reconsider since I'm trying to start the business justification on a CLM tool. So that's going to be fun.
That is always a fun endeavor to build the buy-in to be able to do that transition from one tool to the next. And if you need some guidance on that, I'm sure a number of us have been through it and happy to provide some, I guess, ways to navigate it and to help build that buy-in.
Danica, I asked about Aperio because one of our legal departments in Europe is interested in using it, and their niche is that they can get through an API, they can get billings from your law firms on any schedule that you want. So you don't have to wait for monthly billings and whatnot. They feel that is helpful in saving money because people report more quickly and don't wait till the end of the month. I would think that it would be very disruptive to the way that we do work because you would need somebody to be looking at things, reach back out to the firm. Maybe they haven't evaluated whether those hours that have been submitted by the associates were actually acceptable to the relationship partner. So it seems to me very disruptive, but and they're big in Europe and they're newer here in the US, but their niche about getting information more quickly seemed more disruptive to me, but some of the attorneys, some of their clients obviously like it very much. So I was just curious if anybody had any interaction with a tool that did things that way and whether there were any benefits over disadvantages.
So here at Oracle, we're actually using Tracker in conjunction with HBR dashboards. So HBR dashboards, we gather a series of metrics around our doc reviews and the attorneys and doc reviewers. And then that helps us look at the actual invoices submitted into Tracker and try to reconcile those and identify issues, which it's over the, I think 3 or 4 years we've been using them together, allowed us to save millions of dollars, basically identifying incorrect coding, like incorrect use of lead codes, being able to show our attorneys where they're doing doc reviews using too high a level of doc reviewer, It also allowed us to negotiate price points on doc review. So I definitely am a big fan of trying to combine Tracker with tools that help you look at your metrics around stuff.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, we were using Legal Tracker, but when it was implemented long before my time, there were a lot of limiters in place, and it's caused us to, over time, get to a point where invoices were being managed in 5 different ways, depending on how it was coming into the organization. And it created a lot of manual work and efforts. Part of it was just based on how it was priced out, and we didn't want to put all of our spend through Legal Tracker. And part of it was because it didn't integrate accurately and seamlessly into our ERP systems. So that was creating more errors than streamlined effectiveness. And then we also had over time a transition of our procurement platforms. And so how we would onboard new third parties to get them paid was inconsistent on whether or not it came through the e-billing solution or through our procurement solution. So part of our transition into a new platform, and we're moving into Dewey Legal at this point, is to be able to have a singular method for capturing all of our spend, not just with our firms. So we could have consistent visibility and an ease of integration into our ERP. So we're really excited of what's to come. But as a few of you have mentioned, we felt that there were some reporting limitations coming out of Legal Tracker. And from what we're understanding, Dewey Legal will be more robust in that area, where we can schedule reports of varying audiences to be able to go out on a regular cadence. So we'll be able to more proactively and strategically manage our spend going forward. So we're super excited about something new coming forward, but it's taken a while to get there. And it's not without other challenges for any other companies that are on this call that are global. Figuring out what your different ERP systems are across the globe and how many different integrations that you need to factor into your rollout schedule and making all that work. So that's a little bit more sharing from my side and my experiences on e-billing as each of you are starting to open it up and share yours. Does anyone else have any familiarity with or concerns or lessons learned about kind of an auto pay scenario? Because I know certainly from our organization, we love to have control and discretion on whether or not the invoice was accurate and aligned to the agreed upon bill rates before we allow for it to be processed for payment.
I was just going to mention that we at CSL use Ascent. We rolled it out in February of last year, so we're just coming up on a year of usage. So I don't have a lot of feedback yet, but overall, I mean, I'd like in Ascent you can create your own reports, and the customer service I would say is phenomenal. So to be determined future, but for now I think it's been a pretty good tool for us.
Can I ask something, Danica? So we do not have an e-billing tool, and it's something that we're discussing, and it's very interesting to hear others' experience. It's very insightful for me. My question is, and I see we have Lisa from Oracle, and it's interesting to hear your concern. So is there such a thing as an integration if, for example, a procurement department is using Oracle or finance is using Oracle for invoice payments, and they're the ones to initiate and manage payments under that program? So is there such a thing that, you can integrate the two So you do manage your billing through your e-billing tool from legal, but the payment is issued through the integration. Like if you are approving under your SAO an expense for legal expenses, can that count as an approval for an integration for Oracle to issue the payment?
Yes. So basically, the vendor submits an electronic version of their invoice to Tracker. It gets reviewed by a series of approvers. Once it's approved fully, then it basically gets authorized for payment, and then we're integrated to our Oracle ERP system to then issue the payment to the submitter. Now, one clarification, we are one though, where we do have a very limited number of legal suppliers who do not submit into Tracker. It's for very specific reasons, but the bulk of our stuff goes through Tracker and is auto-paid through our ERP system.
Good news, I guess.
Hey, Lisa, this is Brian at Discover. It sounds like our shops are set up almost identically. I'm just kind of curious, do you have an API integration with your accounts payable system or your Oracle system, or is it like a batch file that gets created on a daily basis and like SFTP'd over to them?
So initially it was batch, and then I believe the current version is the API integration. That was on the original roadmap, was to do the API integration. Perfect.
Yeah, we're still doing batch. We run a batch process every day at 2 o'clock, and then we send that file over for processing. But I might pick your brain at some point in time, because maybe the API would make some sense on down the road. So.
Brian, is it a manual API batch push you guys have to do?
No, it's scheduled, so it automatically runs and then delivers the file via SFTP. So we don't actually have to physically touch anything. It just the file, magically shows up in the AP inbox. So, but I think the API integration might be maybe a more secure or reliable way of doing this, because once in a while you will have batch failures, and then you got to kind of hunt it down. So.
And I'm curious, Brian, you've explained the batch to your accounting, but
Yeah.
do you have a batch coming back in? So you
We do.
have
Yeah, they have a
payment
results
visibility?
file that generates on Fridays for basically the week's activity. And then that file actually goes to Thomson Reuters, and they load that for us. So.
So it sounds like you're ripe for opportunity to build in an API to
Yeah, exactly.
streamline that
Because
flow.
there's a bit of a delay there, right? We could actually pay an invoice on Tuesday, but we don't get the results into the system until Friday. So there's always a little bit of a blackout period where we know it's in transit and we know it's been paid, but we can't reflect it in the system yet. So.
And we do something that just a little bit, we do batched going to our SAP, but on the way back, we do have an API to notify Ascent that it has been paid. So I think there's a lot of different integration possibilities out there.
So one tip that we learned painfully, so we had a different e-billing vendor before Tracker. So if you are an international company, you want to make sure it can work with both your domestic and international accounts. So because our first one failed because it could do US and Canada just fine, but had major hiccups with Latin America and Europe and Asia. So that's another thing to take into account. And then also someone else mentioned pricing. So you want to watch for them pricing based on the amount of the invoice, because if you have certain types of vendors, like let's say you're doing flat fee with somebody on something, that might significantly increase your e-billing costs. So you may want to handle certain things outside of your e-billing system. But again, it's all based on pricing you've negotiated with the e-billing vendor.
Yeah, I'll add to that. When I was at Adobe before, we had a lot of issues with international payments, but that was only because our accounts payable team required hard copies to be delivered. And then of course, if there's you can't make reductions to an invoice if if that amount changes and it doesn't match the hard copy. We then had to go and get an updated invoice to make sure it abided by accounting laws for international teams. So that's always a major concern, that telling our team that yes, even though you have the ability to reduce an international invoice, we strongly suggest going back to the firm if you have any disputes, because it will create some issues and payments will not go out as scheduled until you have a hard copy that specifically matches what you're willing to pay. So definitely a lot of international considerations.
This is very helpful. Thanks, everyone. And we've been talking about the tools that some of us have had and transitioned to and where we are and what we're working through. But in the poll results, there's also some of you that aren't using tools today. You're using spreadsheets, and some of you that are using other. I'm curious if we can explore the other. If you're not using an e-billing tool and you're not using Excel, how are you monitoring and managing, if you are, your spend with outside counsel or flex attorneys? Okay, I see a response in the chat of Smartsheet being one. Thank you. And then for those that are working from spreadsheets or something other than an e-billing solution, I'm curious if it's based on resource or funding limitations, or because you don't have enough volume to justify the need, or if there's another driver behind that. Or you just love doing things manually. Great, thank you. I see some sharing in the chat. I appreciate you all letting us know in that arena. Because it's always helpful for people to take into consideration what are the limiters, what's preventing efficiencies, if the efficiencies exist and are available, and to use this group as resources to help you navigate into getting more effective and efficient, either using what you've got or investing in something new or different. So this is, again, a safe platform for us to share, as we have been doing, some of the challenges we've been faced with the technologies we're using, or the limitations we have in getting enough resources to be able to invest in those tools. So would it help you all if we talk through how to leverage the tools that you have in a way to best access the data, and how to leverage that data to build out information for your executive teams to guide the conversation toward managing your spend in a different way? I want to guide the conversation in whatever is useful for all of you and the pain points that you're struggling with today. We have a quiet group today. Does anyone have any pain points in this area?
I would love to hear how people, analyze their data and how they're either setting flat fees or looking at rates and how they're making decisions about that within their organizations.
I'll share on that one. I'm a sharer. So I will say it's always interesting because I think there's always this debate about alternative fee arrangements, because for us, we say, oh, we identify as fixed fee sometimes as like a project. It is one, it's an all you can eat. But on the firm side, the way that they propose AFAs is just combining the amount of hours they think and then timesing that times their normal hourly rates. And so what do you really consider that to be, hourly, or is it really an AFA? Because they still bill you an hourly rate. I will say I've done it a couple different ways. in the previous roles, we did have a really good relationship with our preferred firms and did something that was absolutely crazy. And I know Amazon is doing the same thing. It is an all-you-can-eat fixed fee. It is, we set an amount and we say, this is the amount for litigation every single month you charge us, and this is the amount for everything else that you charge us. There is a lot of work that goes into, and not a lot of negotiating that goes into what that amount actually is, because the firm is saying, we don't ever want to end up in a situation where we're losing money, but then we're in a situation where like, well, we don't also want to pay you more money. So of course we added language for a chargeback that if it was over or under a certain amount, there would either be a credit back to us that would be used for future months, or money coming back to us for that. It is not something that most leaders I know like to do unless you have certain things or you can predict what that spend would be like to actually have a true all-you-can-eat fixed fee. Like I said, it's something that Amazon does with some of their preferred firms, and it's work. But it also, I think the other conversation is when you do have these AFAs, do you still do shadow billing or not? Because that's where a lot of people are determining what that appropriate amount to charge is. And if you don't know shadow bills and you're just relying on the firm, you're like, well, you're telling me, the value was this amount, but I probably wouldn't have paid that amount because it falls outside our balance, guidelines, or there's not a markup that normally happens during the hourly rate billing process. Here at Palo Alto Networks, we don't do that as much. We're not so big on AFAs. Our general counsel is much more pushing on discounts on hourly rate and locking those. Most of our leaders come from law firms, so they're like, we're not doing this 2-year lock. We're not pushing them for more money. We don't care about the time they spend on internal meetings, which blows my mind. So now we're rolling out an update to our billing guidelines, and we're asking the firms to confirm the discount. And of course, we know the volume of work that we anticipate, or at least the relationship we want to build. So we're asking those firms that we know we want strategic partnerships with to say, we want a discount of 12.5% on all of our rates, and you have to upload a rate sheet before that, so we know that there's not changes or you're not marking up on certain things or that. So it's not easy, but it also, I think, depends on the practice area lead and how innovative they want to get with some of these things versus others who are like, I'm fine, I don't want to rock the boat at all. But then there's others who are like, rock the goddamn boat, we're going in, and this is what they just have to take it or leave it. So I guess it just depends on the approach, and then you just have to figure out a way to have the conversation since it's all on us, right? So I'll just share that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that sharing. One of the other
I have a question for Latrice. So with Amazon, are they doing it just because they're Amazon, or do they have metrics that allow them to manage what their anticipated spend is within a certain range?
From what I heard from Sam, and they don't do any shadow billing, which is pretty crazy. It is really a system of trust. They negotiated a fee based on kind of there are certain types of work that kind of go in, and they don't get it all, they get certain types. And so based on that, they were able to do some metrics before that fixed fee of determining what that amount or volume would be. Of course, considering a volume may go up and it may go down. And it's always a quarterly conversation that they have. They, gather the metrics and the data from the firm who keeps track of that anyways. But they don't do any shadow billing or anything like that. They just say, the firm says, hey, this is where we think we're at as far as volume. We see an uptick in matters or things like that. And then they'll discuss what that new fee would be. But yeah, they are, by the way, the firm we did it, the firm they're doing this with is the firm that we did it with. So this firm has gotten in this cadence of like, we could do it and it could be successful. And we've seen it build a really great partnership where it's not this like nickel and diming kind of situation, or we're having to tell them they're billing us for a lot of things that they shouldn't. So it also just, I think, depends on the firm and if they've ever done something like this. So the law firm has told us that it was good that they did ours on a much smaller scale before they got to Amazon because they weren't prepared for that level. But it really depended on the experience of those who were managing the relationship to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Because yeah, I've talked to other firms that are like, yeah, that's never going to happen. So just depends. Any other questions?
And it looks like we've got some sharing happening in the chat. So I'll direct your attention over there about some dashboard usage, different metrics and information points that are pulled in, and use of Power BI. So thanks for all that sharing. You know, and I've seen as well, taking the information and working in partnership with the attorneys and based on certain practice areas, helping them narrow down how many firms that they're willing to leverage. You know, taking it where it over time, I don't know about your companies, but over time, the legacy attorneys might have built in or brought in different firms based on their prior relationships as they came in and new relationships that they fostered. And all of a sudden, you know, you have this large pool of firms to leverage. But then when you take the analytics and information and you do it by practice area, you can scale it down to the firms that practice in the locations where you need that focus with the niche skills of the law that they're practicing in the locations that you need to tap into it. And you're able to, you know, strengthen your negotiation position of what those firm rates could look like as you narrow down using one or two firms for each practice area instead of a different firm for everywhere in the world that you're working with. So that's another way that we leverage that data to have those targeted conversations to narrow down the focus and the relationships in a more thoughtful way. So with that, you know, how many of you are today working with a third party that helps you manage and monitor and address your spending, either on the front end through creating a bid process before you secure a firm, or reviewing your data and analytics and measuring it against benchmarking of what's happening in those practice areas? Is anyone using third parties to help manage and monitor your your spend habits? All right, so there won't be much of a conversation around that. I know that there are a few members, I don't see them in attendance today, that have tapped into third parties that can step in the middle. Some take on reviewing the analytics that are coming out of your e-billing solutions, and they benchmark it across the marketplace and their data and analytics and provide back to you opportunities for savings, and others that insert themselves squarely in the middle, where they're helping you take your need and uh, run essentially a bid process to make sure that the firms are giving a preferred rate forward and that it's not your contracted rate, it's a rate based on opportunity. And that they know that they're bidding for it so they can sharpen their pencils and be more aggressive in that space. And I know that companies have approached me and my organization with interest in giving us those opportunities to leverage what they have to offer. So, you know, selfishly curious if anyone's tried it out and if it was successful for you. And it looks like Daryl has raised a question about Is it Mitra or Mitra Tech?
Yeah, it's Mitra Tech.
Thank you.
I realized I said that without going on mute.
It's all good. We've all been there. So has anyone used them before?
Maybe we're their only customer.
So as their only customer, no, represented on this particular call, how's it working out?
It has worked fine for many years as a billing processing machine, and and that only. And so trying to unlock the potential that's there, and just looking for others who've had experience with pulling the data out of them, out of their systems without it breaking the bank, basically.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Daryl? All right, well, thank you for sharing. And it looks like there's a question being raised around diversity information and tracking information, wanting to know if anyone's using any tools in support of keeping track of your diversity spend with firms. So, and I
Danica,
was, oh, go ahead.
we're doing that right now, is collecting as much diversity information as the firms will release for Mansfield rule requirements. And it's basically a spreadsheet that we throw into Power BI so that we can look at the metrics, and so that the user, the lawyers on our in-house team can't see the specific metrics on each person. So only 2 people in the entire department can see individual metrics on each person, including outside counsel and in-house on, for different parameters that we're looking for Mansfield. So that way there's no, you can't have any accusations of saying that you had any sort of harassment or discrimination, but you can see overall the metrics for each group. So if you wanted to see what the metrics were for this matter or overall for this law firm, you can see that. But
Yeah,
it's basically an Excel sheet.
I asked the question because we just had a very multiple detailed conversations on the Mansfield rule. And of course, talking to our billing provider about gathering the diversity information. I think while the tool is great to have that on timekeepers and then also knowing the matters, I think where we felt that the information in there didn't really kind of paint the bigger picture, right? Because there was things of, okay, we can see who's billing our time against our hours, but we didn't get the information about like who's getting the credit for that, right? We've seen some situations where the person that we interact with so happens to be a diverse attorney at a law firm, but the person who started the relationship 10, 15 years ago was not, and that person's getting the credit, not the new person. And that's information that we realize our billing system won't necessarily track. It only goes so far. And so the other thing to that was on the Mansfield rule is like, well, it's great that firms can be Mansfield certified, but doesn't necessarily mean those are the diverse attorneys on my matters. So there's some pros and cons about it. And then we are getting a demo of Justice Bid in a couple of weeks, which is also, I don't know if anyone here is using it, but they have a firm-wide dashboard that they've invited firms to submit their information, and it goes into like attorneys who got promoted, that were eligible for promotion, understanding like committees and practice leads, because that's also trying to find that balance between being Mansfield certified and checking that mark, but also trying to gather the information in a simple way that kind of incorporates all the things that matter to us. So I was just curious on how folks are doing that, because we built out a very detailed questionnaire in Qualtrics, which is an advanced survey tool. But I was just curious if anyone else was doing that.
As far as how our matters are staffed by outside counsel, we just ask them, and it's a yes/no question. Are they going to be staffed at least 50% by, some sort of through our diversity metrics that we require them, or if origination is going to happen, at least half of our matters are staffed that way. And we just ask them, it's yes or no. It's a yes, it's going to be staffed this way, or no, because based on, who's in the practice group, sometimes it just doesn't happen. But overall, over a 2-year period, it tends to balance out. But we just flat out ask them, because a lot of firms are not releasing their diversity metrics anymore on individual timekeepers. They're doing it overall for the entire firm or location, but they're not doing it at the individual level because there's privacy issues.
Yeah.
So I've had some conversations with Justice Bid, and I think it's a great idea. The challenge is he doesn't have a whole lot of data right now. And one of our concerns was that the firms would get fatigue in answering everybody's surveys and questionnaires. But if you have a relatively mature diversity program and you feel like you can get your firms to respond to Justice Bid, both in their general numbers as well as the people who are working on your matters, he's got some pretty good dashboards that he can create for you. So we're looking at it, but we're kind of at the beginning of our journey. And I think a lot more people have responded to ABA and Diversity Lab. So we've started there. But Justice Bid looks, I mean, it is a little bit pricey, but he slices and dices stuff in a way that some of the other ones don't.
Yeah, and the way that I took it, because I've built a relationship with Omar as well, and this whole discussion started like 2 years ago, which is one of the reasons I think why I helped him build it, was I think, as more people sign up, right, that firm-wide data becomes available to anyone who has an account, right, essentially, which is free. And then of course, like I said, the client-specific dashboard that asks about our matters, I haven't seen that so far, which is why we're going to get a demo of it. I think the hardest part when I remember gathering this information outside of the tool was the amount of work it takes to analyze the data and then make it look nice and pretty for our leadership to then go and have a conversation, which I think is the part that I'm trying to avoid doing. Right. Having to be the one to create the survey, analyze the responses, put together, make it look nice and pretty, and then saying, okay, is this really the progress that we want to see? And of course, we don't do it with every firm. The approach that I'm taking is it's only going to be on firms that we have top spend with, or those that we want to build strategic partnerships. Because it's, for an employment firm that's in the middle of, Beijing, that, is obviously not going to happen. But for those that are global firms, who we know have the flexibility to have diverse staff, we want them to submit that information. So yeah, to your point, it does slice and dice, but I haven't seen the client specific side of that to say like, yes, it's worth the spend on doing that. But the way that I approach it is, if we did go that route, what the push is, having the firm submit it then encourages them to be transparent about how well they're doing on their diversity. Because I think that's also the part of that where that information is not being shared, right? We ask them to do ABA, only those responses come to us. We ask them to be Mansfield certified, but we know that Mansfield is more of a checkbox rather than actually holding them accountable on seeing the numbers and the progress they're making, matter by matter or within specific practice groups. So it feels like there's not been this perfect way to do it. And yeah, Medora, we did talk to them about the diversity dividends collective. So we're going to have an internal meeting of like, if that's something we want to sign up to do. Because I think to that point though, you know, a firm you can be working with can be Mansfield certified, but doesn't mean that your matters are staffed with diverse, right? But then it leads the conversation with them. I think that's where Diversity Lab is definitely improving on some of the things that they're having conversations about. So thank you,
And
everyone.
that's the whole point of the Mansfield rule, is to start the conversation to get. That's why they don't ask for 100% compliance, because one, that's impossible, but two, it's just to start the conversation to, as they say, move the needle. That's the whole point of the whole certification process too.
Yeah. I think the only, when we had the conversation with them, I said on the outside counsel teams, I'm like, tracking the practice areas or co-lead practice areas, whew, that's a lot for matters, because most of the time, I mean, most of you guys can probably agree, when our teams are selecting firms, most of the time it's after they've already engaged with them and they have billing guidelines that they need, or engagement letter to be reviewed and stored somewhere, or a matter to be open. And so now trying to change behavior, getting us involved a lot earlier in that conversation, and also trying to push them to use, if the matter doesn't require a big name firm, why aren't they using NAML firms or other firms that have that diversity focus, that, you know, they're going to be much more appreciative of my work than going to an AM 100 firm and I'm spending only a couple $1,000. So it's definitely a change of behavior too.
It's always a cultural shift and behavioral adaptation, and yeah, to help migrate them through a different mindset of, hey, you're not working with, you know, your best friend anymore. You're now driving it based on either diversity classification, or you're driving it based on saving some money for the company. Different drivers than what they're historically used to, right? Of I'm comfortable with them. They handled my last matter and they did a great job, so I want to stick with them on all matters, regardless of whether or not that's their specialty and practice area. So it's definitely a learning and an adjustment, and great conversation. I just wanted to bring it back full circle, because we went, you know, down this diversity path, but to tie it back into the topic of today of e-billing, as you've seen through the conversation and some of the dialogue, that depending on where you land after you've had your internal conversations, and, you know, treading lightly on where are you tripping over the boundaries of personal confidential information that shouldn't be disclosed or asked for. But if you structure your e-billing systems in such a way that you're allowing self-disclosure should they choose to provide it, and deciding if you're going to capture it at the firm level or the timekeeper level, so you know whether or not you're tracking whether or not the firm is owned and operated with their primary partners fitting into these different classifications, or if they're giving those opportunities like we were talking about with Move the Needle. And Latrice, as you were diving in to making sure that the associates are getting these opportunities to participate, and that it takes the companies such as ours to drive that conversation and let them know it's important to us that they're giving their associates opportunities to step forward and build their resume and have the experiences to engage and to grow their careers. And that's where we really want to see that that needle moving forward. And if you build it into either these third-party relationships with Justice Bid or Diversity Labs or whoever you choose, or you choose to manage it through your e-billing tools or through your spreadsheets. It's about building out the technology systems and visibility that you and your company need to monitor how you're spending, where you're spending, and who you're giving opportunities to you and who you no longer should, right? So we have lots of different opportunities. We've heard about some of them today. I really am appreciative for those of you that stepped forward and chose to share some of your challenges along the way, areas that have worked out for you, tools that are proving out for you, opportunities to collaborate with each other on API integrations or combo of what you're going to do through an FTP or a push or pull, or how you're going to manage through smart sheets. So lots of great information shared. We're coming up on time, so I want to take a few minutes to first and foremost say thank you to my co-chair, Brian Pomeroy, not just for his contributions today, but helping to build forward this agenda and topic so we could keep the conversation flowing. So thank you, Brian. And then, of course, our partners here at the ACC with Bronco and KJ in helping doing all the prep work and facilitating the meetings. Really appreciate your support and efforts there. And to remind you all that some of the topics you've been talking about, some of our other resource groups have touched on recently. I think they even had Move the Needle presents. So I encourage you to go out to the forum. Also, spend some time in listening to some of the recordings if you didn't make those sessions, and joining us for future conversations. So if today was your first time participating in Tools and Tech, hopefully you found some value there, and join us again next month. I think our next session is going to be on February 22nd at the same time. So 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Mountain. We'll announce the topic in short order. We're just ironing out some details. And if there are any topics that you would love to see us cover in the future, please message us. Let us know so we can get that into our curriculum and share that knowledge forward. So with that, thanks everyone. Really appreciate your time today. KJ, was there anything else from the ACC that you wanted to get in front of everyone?
No, that's all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks everyone. Take care and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Danica.
Thanks, Danica.